Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by AWS and Snyk. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel ahead. Before we begin, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude the live session today. If you look to the right side of your screen, you'll notice there are a couple of options for you to engage with our panel today. The first of which is the chat tab. So I'd like you to start using that for me right now. Let us know where you are tuning in. We'd like to see where everyone's from and kind of get a sense of where our audience is. If you have any questions for our panel, I'd like you to direct those questions to the Q&A tab. That Q&A tab is directly to the right of the chat. So feel free to send any questions you have there. We'll try to get to them as soon as we can throughout our program. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of our program today. I'll also call out that there are some handouts over in that handouts tab for you. So feel free to grab those at your leisure. So our topic of discussion today is how Atlassian scaled a developer security solution across thousands of engineers. And I'm joined by the team that did it. Chris Walls, Senior Product Security Engineer at Atlassian, Jason Lane, Product Marketing Director at Snyk, and Will Ratner, Senior Product Security Engineer at Atlassian. So Chris, Jason, and Will, thank you all so much for joining me today. Jason, do you want to get this going?
Sure. Thanks, Cody, for kicking things off. And hey, everybody, welcome to another Techstrong webinar today. Thank you for joining. Chris, Will, how are you doing today?
Good.
Great.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and just give a little bit of background on each of us. So I'll start, and I'll just say that I'm the product marketing director here at Snyk, one of several. I actually focus on Snyk open source and Snyk code, our open source and our static analysis AppSec products. I've been with Snyk for almost a year and a half or so, and I worked for another AppSec vendor before that for about a year. So I've got two and a half years or so of security experience, and I've worked in the various developer ecosystems throughout my entire career, and big and small companies. So in any case, Chris, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. So I am a product security engineer at Atlassian. So I'm on the product security team. It's just the application security role here at Atlassian. My team I'm in the vulnerability management program. So my team manages things like the Atlassian bug bounty. We're basically try to find and fix vulnerabilities in our products and services. So like I said, we manage the bug bounty, but we also manage a lot of third-party scanning tools, things like Snyk. And I think the reason I'm here specifically is I was one of the people who helped onboard and roll out Snyk open source at Atlassian.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me today. And Will Ratner is also on. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Will, very similar background to Chris. We are both on the same team. The only difference is that I focus on rolling out and onboarding Snyk container.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you both. I'm excited about this session here. I think we'll dig in a little bit, and we've had a couple of prep sessions, but I hope that we can have some transparency here and just sort of share what your experiences were, both before and after Snyk, and we could talk a little bit of philosophy and that sort of thing. So to get started, so these are the different areas here that we're going to be kind of digging in on. We'll talk about your environment. We'll talk about before Snyk, after Snyk, and then a little bit of strategy and philosophy. So let's dig in here with the first section. So I don't know which one of you guys would like to kick it off, but I think we can just put it out there for both of you to kind of share with the group here. What is your IT environment look like? Are you using the cloud? Hopefully. Are you, what sort of tooling are you using? Your repos, SCMs? I'm assuming you're using some Atlassian tools as well. So.
Yeah. go ahead, Chris. You've been here long.
Sure. Yes, I've been here a while. So yeah, we are almost exclusively an AWS shop. So we use a ton of AWS resources. We generally, the way we have used, the way it's set up is we have a lot of it's abstracted away from sort of the day-to-day development. So we have a team that manages a internal, basically SaaS tool called Micros that we've set up that will allow people within the company to deploy services, and it will automatically do a lot of the provisioning. It'll set up, an auto-scaling group with EC2 instances. You basically provide it with a container and some configuration information, and that service will do all of the various provisioning and set up and create alarms for you and create, if you need a database, it'll create a database for you and link it and all that stuff. So there's a bit of an abstraction layer between people like me who are just trying to deploy a service or get something running and the actual AWS infrastructure that's happening, but all of that is kind of going on behind the scenes.
You guys have a team. You guys have a team of people that manage that software and manage the pipelines and that whole build process.
We do, yeah. That's their job, is sort of setting that up and maintaining it, and answering questions.
What's their title? Are you guys going with the platform engineering titles these days? I know that's a fairly new title, or is it more DevOps titles for those folks?
I forget what they actually call themselves, honestly.
Yeah, there's a new there's a new terminology that's being pushed around a lot that we're sort of combining DevOps with DevSecOps. It's now turned into platform engineering, right? And it sort of does all of that stuff where you manage the build and help bridge the gap between the developers and security and cloud engineers. So it's interesting. We lose one.
But yeah, but yeah, beyond that, so like in terms of building, writing code, deploying code, so we obviously use a lot of Atlassian products for that. So most of our code is hosted on Bitbucket, either Bitbucket Cloud, or we have an internal Bitbucket server instance we use that some teams use. And we use things like Bitbucket pipelines for doing our CI/CD or Bamboo. So that's sort of our general flow that we use.
Awesome. The micro software that you mentioned, is that something you guys built, or is that a third-party software that you buy?
Yeah, that was developed internally. It goes way back. I forget exactly when we started doing that, but it's been sort of developed iteratively over the years. Yeah, it works out really well. And so
it's funny that you guys call it Micros, because I think there's a Micros. There's actually a Micros security tool out there that
Yeah, I think the idea was it was used to deploy microservices, and so they gave it that name. But it's gone way beyond that at this point.
Yeah, that's funny. So I think Will is having some connection issues here. So it'll be you and I for a little bit. Hopefully, you can join us back. But
okay.
I know this is more Will's sort of forte, because he was part of the process of feeling the pain before Snyk. So I'd love to hear his take on it. But I think maybe we'll start with you and dig in on the next sort of set of questions here, which is, what was the state of your vulnerability management before using Snyk? What sort of pain? Oh, there he is. Hey, Will.
Back. Sorry about that. Everything just disconnected.
We're just digging into the next section, which I think is going to be right up your alley, since I think you helped with this process. But in any case, so wondering, just what did you guys do before Snyk? What were some of the pain points you were looking at, and how did you secure your applications? That sort of thing. Maybe walk us through that.
Yeah, so for SCA type, the equivalent of Snyk open source for looking at dependency vulnerabilities, we were using another tool earlier. We had kind of deployed it in sort of a piecemeal way. We weren't super happy with how it was working, honestly. It was basically, we would install it in people's CI/CD, or reach out to developers, try to get everyone to run a scan as part of their build process, and then we were trying to grab that data, or basically use that data to try to pass or fail builds depending on what it finds, and then try to, based on that, go back and file vulnerability tickets in Jira for things. We were running into issues with scale doing it that way. So for one thing, the solution was not terribly reliable. So having it built into people's CI/CD pipelines, if the service went down, everybody's build suddenly broke, and it was a huge incident company-wide, and then everything ground to a halt, and people started yelling at the security team, which was no fun.
Yeah, I'm very big on this because I actually worked. Well, I shouldn't say. I worked for a company like that, but I know that there's a big difference between being developer friendly and developer first, and I've been pushing that obviously the company Snyk has coined the developer first sort of market, right, for the most part, but it's really important that we distinguish the difference between developer first and developer friendly, because that's exactly it, right? Like, even though those companies might have a integration to your pipeline, it's not very easy, and in fact it could be very painful in some cases. So I think that's the difference. That's a little subtle difference of like being developer first, because the things that we do at Snyk are like, we make sure that the pipelines won't break if something isn't quite there, so anyways, those are just little subtle details, but yeah. So how did you guys get along? Like, how did you guys end up keeping things secure if it was breaking builds all the time?
Well, yeah, it was hard. So we basically had to manually check to make sure that that these things were still in people's pipelines. So we would know which product, which repos are tied to our kind of key products. We would have to sort of audit things pretty regularly, make sure that we were still scanning stuff. We didn't have a good sense of what our overall coverage was, because if you tell people to install something, they do it, then maybe they have removed it at some point, and it was becoming a real challenge to kind of keep up with that. But we were doing our best with sort of what that solution provided. They didn't have a API we could use, which was also an issue, because we wanted, as the security team, to be able to sort of automate as much of this process as possible, and that wasn't doable the way it was set up. And so that was another pretty big pain point there.
Yeah. And then what about Will on the container side? How did you guys maintain container security?
Yeah, so initially there was no container security. You got to start somewhere, right? And what kind of triggered that was we were going through the FedRAMP process for one of our products. Obviously, one of the requirements for FedRAMP is to have some form of container scanning. And we initially used a tool that was on-prem, so you had to operate your own infrastructure on it, which I know for me and most of the people I work with, we want as little operational overhead as possible. And so that was one challenge when we were first starting out with that tool, as well as the fact that it didn't have a UI available. So we're trying to display all this information to our development teams basically through Jira tickets, which isn't the best way to do it all the time, especially when there's really only so much information you can fit on a ticket. And sometimes, depending on the information or the vulnerability, we need to provide a lot of data to help the development teams figure out where and what's causing the issue. So those are kind of two main issues we were facing and dealing with, and having to make sure that our infrastructure was up to date, and if something went wrong with that tool that we were using, figuring out how to resolve it while also not missing out on vulnerabilities during our scanning process.
Okay. What David is asking a question here. What information did Snyk display in their UI to help development teams figure out where issues are and what causes them?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces. So there's like the introduced field, and then the nearest fixed version fields, which are very nice. Obviously, that information is available with other tools. It's just the way that it's displayed to the users, especially even when we're trying to order things from like a priority standpoint, right? You have the severity of different issues, critical, high, medium, low. Before it's just kind of all in text, and it's hard for teams to truly understand like what issues they should be focusing on first. Whereas with Snyk, it was nice. It's color coded. There's priority scores. One of the things that we've taken advantage of with container scanning is the relative importance. So you'll have issues that might have a CVSS score of 9.8, but the distro like Debian or Ubuntu have evaluated it themselves and found that it's really not a big issue. It's negligible, and they don't plan on fixing it. And so things are adjusted that way, and we're able to give our teams more high fidelity tickets or alerts on what to fix versus some of the other tooling we were using.
Cool. I just realized that we kind of jumped ahead just a tad, and I want to make sure we close out this section of like the pain that you were feeling before. Anything else you guys want to call out that we may have not addressed, and then we can maybe talk about implementing the implementation process.
I don't think so.
I think that pretty much covers it.
Cool. All right, so let's dive into the next section then and talk about, what your implementation process was like when you guys obviously, found Snyk and started to trial it. I guess, what were some of the things that, you saw in maybe even the early days of trialing it that you realized like, oh, wow, this is going to be so much less pain?
Yeah. So I think the scanning tool, so like the CLI tool that Snyk provides to do the scanning part that we compared to what we were using before, right away I noticed was significantly more reliable. It was able to scan a lot more of our projects, cover a lot more of the languages that we were using. The just quality of the data was a big thing. So just looking at like the Snyk UI and how it tracks all these CVEs out there, I think we were getting much fewer, seeing much fewer issues. With the other solution, we were getting kind of comments from developers who would get an issue and say, this doesn't seem right. I went and looked at the CVE and it doesn't apply here for whatever reason. And it seemed like the Snyk data was much more in line with what was actually the sort of source of truth for things. So yeah, I think that was one of the initial, and just the pain points I had mentioned earlier. Like Snyk had an API that was available to use,
Starting point,
which was a huge thing. Like it just seemed like a much more mature software product.
Are your developers using the IDE integrations as well? Are they finding issues like early on in the dev process?
Yes. So we've things like the IDE integration, or like the pipeline integration that you can run as part of your build.
Are you using PR checks as well?
Right. Yeah. Well, so some are. So we've made those available to teams. So people, depending on sort of a developer's process, like they can use whichever one sort of makes sense for them. We've had a few different, people have used it in a few different ways. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value there to getting out of it. A lot of the security, a lot of what we've done as part of the rollout is more of like a top down, like try to make sure everything is getting scanned one way or another.
Okay.
But then developers are kind of free to additionally to that use Snyk, to monitor their branches to make sure that they're not merging in something with new issues, or use the IDE plugins to fix things before they get pushed, that sort of thing.
We can talk about it now. I think it might come up a little bit later, but I was wondering just like your philosophy around, how did, let's go back to the title of the webinar. Like, how did you scale? How did you get thousands of developers to use Snyk? Because I know that's one of the big challenges that a lot of CISOs and a lot of security organizations have with some of the legacy tools that are out there. It's like they buy all these tools and they get these bells and whistles and like, this is a great report and it's going to tell me everything I need to know. And then they're like, there's no data. I can't get it. I can't get the team to use it. So how do you magically do that?
Yeah, so for SCA, what we basically did is, so we have a platform we built internally that's sort of the security team's own CI/CD pipeline. So basically we have this service that is installed on all of our repositories, our internal code repos, and it gets a webhook whenever there's a push to any of those. And then it can spin up a Kubernetes pod and run a bunch of scanning tools that we've set up. So basically we can scan all of our code whenever there are changes, and we as the security team can add stuff into that and add new tools, remove old tools, basically manage it without having each team have to install it in their own CI/CD, because that was like I mentioned, that was part of the problem with scaling earlier, is that it required this sort of manual step. And so basically, to roll out Snyk across the company, all we had to do was add it. Well, I'd say it like it's super easy, but we just had to add it to that platform, add it as a scanning tool, and then it just gets run whenever there are code changes.
Yeah.
There are some challenges there because like it requires, for some languages, requires running a build, which is not always the easiest thing when it's sort of naive about what the repository is. But that was sort of our general approach: is we install it on this thing, it scans everywhere, and then we as the security team take that data, and if there are findings that are out there in production, in these services, then we are going to file a Jira ticket to get that issue fixed.
Got it.
That's kind of
I want to come back to the Jira thing later, and I have a like we'll talk about that in the philosophy section, I think, because that's an area where I'd like to dig in a little bit. But Will, on the container front, like how did you guys implement Snyk from a container perspective, and how is that better, different from what you were doing before?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, there really wasn't much before. So we knew if we're going to roll this out, it's a very difficult ask to go to thousands of developers and say, you now need to put this into your Bitbucket pipeline, this tool, and you need to block the build too while you're at it. Don't let any vulnerabilities through. And we haven't been scanning for a long time, so there's probably going to be a lot of issues that you're going to have to work out, and it's going to cause a lot of blockage. So we wanted to just not make the developers do anything at all and let the scanning happen in the background without their knowledge or without them needing to do anything. So at Atlassian, we have an enterprise event bus that basically ingests various messages from various systems. And Chris mentioned our internal kind of platform as a service that we have called Micros. And so when you make a deployment, and Chris also mentioned, to make a deployment to an environment at Atlassian, you just need to have a container. Everything is deployed via containers. So what happens is when they initiate that deployment, it's going to create an event. That event's going to go into the event bus, and we can create a tool that ingests those events so we know every single deployment that's being made. We then know every container that's being made as part of that deployment, whether it's for the particular service, as well as any sidecars that might be around that are used for observability or traceability, and options like that. And so what this does is now whenever they deploy, we're always running a scan. We scan all those containers and we generate tickets to the teams who are deploying these containers that might have issues. And I can dig into the philosophy of why if you want to move there, or we can hold that off.
Yeah, why not? Let's keep it rolling. So I think the reason it's interesting to me is because obviously Atlassian, one of your core products is Jira, which is a ticketing system, right? And I think we talked about this the other day. Our general sort of approach and what we try to do, being a developer first security, AppSec company, is we would like to get the developers. And I think most CISOs strive for this. Most organizations are striving for this. Is to try to prevent security issues from even getting into the code at all, right? So like being able to surface that stuff early on in development. Now, that's a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world, so obviously we need to keep track of those things somewhere, some way, somehow, right? So I think that's where Jira comes in. And it was interesting what you shared with me the other day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, what do you guys believe in? I mean, do you feel like because you're Atlassian and you have Jira that everything should just be a ticket by default, and then we'll work it out later in a sprint?
Yeah, I don't think anyone likes tickets, especially when they have like a due date attached to them, and then we have notifications, so people's managers start getting pinged if it's getting close to the due date, and no one really likes that.
See, look, everybody, even people at Jira don't like Jira. No, I'm just kidding. They like Jira. They just don't like the ticket.
There's tracking your project work, and then there's getting the ticket that's reminding you every day that you have a vulnerability you need to fix.
Exactly.
And so with that, what we found is that by providing tickets to these teams, they're going to come back and they're going to say, like, how can we not get these tickets in the first place? We don't want to receive these. They're disruptive. They cause us to have to like break our project cadence and work on these. And sometimes we don't understand like why. And so what we're able to tell them is, oh, well, if you put Snyk into your Bitbucket pipeline and you let it run, then it's going to catch it beforehand and you're not going to be able to deploy. And now when you fix them before you deploy, you're never going to get a ticket and the issue is solved. And the added benefit to this is in the off chance that they might misconfigure Snyk, or maybe they only care, they want to focus on critical issues first, and that's what they want to break their build. Or maybe they just don't have like the break my build turned off, and so they know there's issues, but they're still deploying anyway. Right? That's still all possible in the pipeline. But with what we've built and what Chris has built means when cases like that happen, we still catch it on the back end, and we can still find those issues that might be slipping through or that somebody accidentally misconfigured. Because I don't think any developers purposely want to deploy vulnerabilities.
Nobody ever wants to be hacked, right?
But accidents happen, misconfigurations happen all the time, and so what we've built allows us to catch that and make sure that anything that might have slipped through, we can get tickets filed for and make sure they get fixed down the line.
Yeah, it's critical to keep track of that work, especially applications that they're not in active development. You throw those up and you scan those code. No developers actively working on it. You're going to scan it, and you're going to find issues. It's going to go into those backlogs, and they can work on them later. So, but that's cool. I think having that motivation to get developers using tickets as motivation to get them to like shift more left, if you will. Like I hate that term, but it's a relevant term. Fix things before they even become issues. Learn security. Identify them in the IDE. Identify them in the pipeline. Our PR checks functionality is really cool because it'll scan pretty quickly, like instantaneously, right? And it'll show you everything that you just changed in that code, whether or not it's introducing a new vulnerability or not. So why would you ever let that continue to go through? Just fix it right there.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's a good balance because you want that, you want their mind share right there instead of having to like wait a week or two and come back and go, wait, what was I working on and how does this work? And
and it makes us feel confident that we have like full coverage across everything, right? That we're not missing anything, nothing's slipping through the cracks. It definitely helps you sleep better at night.
For sure. There's a question in the chat here. I wanted to see if you can address this here. Is do you scan dependencies as well as external libraries and that were used to create the container? So can you just answer that?
Yes, I'm not sure entirely. So we're scanning the container image as it's deployed. So it's not like while it's running, but what it's capturing, what it initially captured was just the system vulnerabilities. So basically anything the package manager was installing into that container, any vulnerabilities in those packages are being captured. And now that Snyk has app phones on by default, we can also get the application vulnerabilities or like those other libraries that might be built or stored as part of the container that was used as the base image, or maybe added on when the container was being built. We can capture vulnerabilities in those dependencies as well.
Okay, cool. What I'm curious, what languages do you guys primarily work with at Atlassian? Everything?
They're all over the place. So our biggest products are Java applications. So there's a lot of Java, but there's also, we have products that are written in Python and JavaScript and just pretty much anything you can see, C#. Like there's a lot of different languages, various mobile things.
Got it. And Snyk has been fairly able to cover all of the things that you guys have in the ecosystem?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky as there are like individual build systems within some of those languages where like a developer might want to try some exotic new build setup that, you know, very few people are using, but like the vast majority of things are covered by Snyk.
Yeah. You know, we didn't talk about this in the prep sessions. I'm going to throw a new question on you guys, but have you guys asked or been asked about SBOMs at all? Like, has anybody asked you to create an SBOM, or have you figured out how to create one? and why? Like, I'm more importantly, like, why are people asking you for that?
Yeah, I think we've definitely gotten requests for that. They typically, my understanding is that those usually come from customers who have either some sort of compliance need or just are, you know, want to know exactly what goes into the products that we're using or that we're making. And yeah, those kind of, we're figuring out, I think at the moment, how we want to approach that, but it does definitely seem like, since we're already scanning everything with Snyk and getting all of the dependency information, that like that's certainly seems like it's going to help with that.
Have you guys tried the new SBOM API yet? If not, this is
I don't think so.
PSA for you guys to go try it, because yeah, it's still in open beta. We're getting ready to GA it pretty soon, but yeah, definitely give that a shot. You can create your Cyclone DX and SPDX files with that, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've played around with it a bit, but I know, like, Chris, you've also, before that was available, I mean, we're capturing all of the dependency information from these projects and storing it in our internal data lake so that it's easily queryable from us, which is really useful when we're trying to see who's using what library across a very large organization.
Do you guys I mean, we're kind of starting to transition into this next category of topics here, but sort of preempting that, do you guys let developers just go in the Wild West and pick whatever they want, or do you guys have a process for you know, vetting new open source packages?
Yeah, so we don't prevent folks from using packages. We do. So you know, obviously we have the system where if you start using something with a vulnerability in it, we're going to flag it. We've looked into, I know Snyk has a feature now that will actually tell you, sort of like give a quality rating to a package. So something like, you know, is it being actively maintained? How many people are part of it? So I think we've definitely seen some interest actually coming from developers about trying to surface that information and, you know, give like a score to each one of the packages they're using, or like try to flag things that might be, you know, higher than a certain threshold of or I guess lower than a certain threshold of quality that they might want to consider replacing. That's not something we've really focused on at the moment, but it's definitely an idea we're interested in.
Yeah, I think also again, going back to the tickets and how much everyone loves them, no one, you know, when you get a ticket to fix a vulnerability in a library that is, you know, you go check GitHub to see what the latest version is you can update to, only to find out that it's no longer maintained and hasn't been maintained for the past 2 years. People start to think like, oh, why did I do this? Maybe I should think about what libraries I'm picking up and making sure that they're going to be maintained, and coming up with some cadence to review what libraries are being used and are they still maintained, looking for end of life situations and how they handle those. So yeah, nothing like official, on our end, but I think we're seeing teams start to look into that
think
as well.
think a little proactively
Yeah.
about what they're picking. That's good. And yeah, Snyk Advisor is the tool that you're thinking of. We're actually going to be bringing a lot of that data into the core product at some point. Our security research team maintains that data, and it's pretty awesome stuff to say, like, you want to see the health of a package, and you can go look for, let's talk about logging, because the next section we're going to talk about 0-day events in Log4j, and how did you guys deal with that? But yeah, so you can find a logging package maybe if you see one that's not secure or not healthy, or maybe it's trending on social, or has like 2 installs, like maybe you can find another one. So anyway, so let's talk about Log4j. So when this happened, by the way, that was like the week I started at Snyk. That was an amazing week. I'm like, oh, this is how AppSec works at Snyk in open source. And I was like drowning for 2 weeks trying to figure out how to respond to this. And yeah, the entire company was going crazy. And then little they know, like that's just like a once in a every 5-year type of thing. Anyway, so how did you guys fare with Log4j, and tooling wise, where were you guys at in the process at that time? And
Yeah, so it was actually a really interesting case study, because it was basically like a month after we'd set up the full automation system I was talking about, where we are pulling data from Snyk to turn into Jira tickets and have like that whole thing running. And so we wake up that morning. I think the news had dropped kind of overnight, so the Australian team had been kind of looking into it and realizing that this was going to be a thing. So we come in the morning, and it's obviously a huge deal. It's all over the news. We're getting customer questions about it left and right, and so we wanted, immediately we need to know who's affected, where do we need to upgrade, which of our products are using the vulnerable version of Log4j. How do we notify all of the people that need to do the updates? How do we get the developers working on it? And how do we make sure that it's getting fixed? All that good stuff. And so it turned out, so we were, like I said, we'd already had this automation set up. We go to the Snyk UI, we look up, and sure enough, it's starting to flag, like, yes, we're finding instances of this new CVE in various things. Like I said, we use a lot of Java, so we were pretty heavily impacted. We used Log4j all over the place, and so we,
whether you knew it or not, right? Like it was it was being pulled in by every package that you had.
Well,
right?
Yes, exactly. Like it's a transitive dependency of so many Java libraries, and so having what we ended up doing is basically that automation typically runs on sort of a daily cycle, where it'll pull the data in from Snyk at midnight UTC or whatever and turn it into Jira tickets. But in this case, we didn't necessarily want to wait that long, so we just kicked it off manually, and it was able to just grab all of the data Snyk had on our scans that we've been doing for about a month at that point, and was just able to spit out, I think, about 1,000 Jira tickets across the company saying like, hey, we found this instance where this product is using this version of Log4j, go and update it now, and it gets assigned to somebody who works on that project. And so all of that is kind of automatically happening, and we just had to basically kick it off.
So that you said that it automatically created Jira tickets. I've only seen the button where the developers can click it manually. So you have it set up so that if it finds an issue in the pipeline, it will automatically generate a Jira ticket for you.
Right. So that's part of the automation we've set up. Is we basically we'll use the Snyk API to just pull down all of the project data from all of the scans we've done and translate that into Jira tickets. So we have.
That's not even that's why I haven't seen it. See, that's something you guys.
Yeah, it's
that's
an internal thing.
I was like, I feel stupid now. I've never seen this before. I'm like, okay, thank God, I'm not stupid.
Yeah, a big part of our workflow is that like big Jira project that has all of our vulnerabilities in it, and so we've built kind of a lot of automation around that to support it. And help us with the ticket filing process, with making sure that they're getting actioned, all that sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Will, from a container perspective, I know OpenSSL was a big issue recently. How did you guys deal with that? And that's a tricky one too, because that one was one where OpenSSL was the vulnerability, but it was being pulled in by all these images, and you had to wait, or other Apache or something. You had to wait for those builds to actually update their software, right? So,
yep. Yeah, and so what we do, and again, this is kind of the benefit of the automation is, and one of the benefits of Snyk is we can know if there is a fixed version from the distro, right? And so in most cases, there's no point in us filing a ticket to teams until there's actually a fix for them to do, an action for them to take, because otherwise they're just going to be wondering what am I supposed to do if Debian or Ubuntu hasn't even released a fix themselves? How am I supposed to fix it?
Exactly.
Especially for something that's like OpenSSL that you kind of need and is baked into these images. And so, like Chris mentioned, what we're doing on the container side when we're scanning is it's all happening real time as they deploy. We do a Snyk test and a Snyk monitor because there's information we need from both of those. And then we're checking information like, is there a fix available? And all of this information, if there is, we're going to file a ticket. We group tickets by the package. So OpenSSL might have a couple CVEs related to it, but we're not going to open a ticket for every CVE. We're going to open a ticket for upgrade OpenSSL to fix these issues. And so, I mean, basically, we're able to we're scanning on demand. So anytime anyone deploys, we're going to be checking. And in the OpenSSL case, I mean, we'll open a ticket and it'll get fixed in a similar process. Ours is a little different where we're not running like once a day like Chris is against Snyk projects. It's real time, so on every deployment. And at Atlassian, deployments, at most will happen every 7 days or at the latest. So, we might not catch something the day of an OpenSSL vuln, but within 7 days, we've captured that in some way, shape, or form and have that supplied to the development teams.
Or if you hear about it on the news, you can go manually scan.
Yes.
Cool. Anything else on 0 days you guys want to call out, or any? I did
want to mention. So one of the things I noticed with the Log4j one especially is throughout that day, and I'm sure anyone else who is working on this remembers this, is that there was new information coming out pretty frequently. Yeah. And so which versions were affected, and then they created a separate CVE for the Log4j version 1, and then so there was
version was vulnerable, and
exactly. And so we had a channel open with Snyk going back and forth talking about when they had updated their database, you all would let us know that okay, there's new information on the CVE, if you could. So we were I mentioned we kicked off a manual scan. We did that multiple times throughout the day as new information was coming in to help update the tickets or alter the severities and things. So there was a lot of kind of back and forth going on there.
I wrote a lot of. It was funny because, like I said, it was the first week I was here, and I was I had to write a blog post about Log4j in the first 3 days I was here, and I was like, okay. and then I wrote another update, and then we had obviously Log4j spawned the the executive order and some other stuff. So there's a lot of that's why I was asking about SBOMs earlier, because that actually became the word of choice for the last 2 years is SBOMs because of Log4j or other previous 0 days. But anyways, it's crazy times. But yeah, so it's good to have the right tooling so you have that visibility and you have that peace of mind, right? The next time we have a whole team of people, pretty large organization in the background, constantly looking for malicious packages, constantly scanning the news. We hear something in the news and we have people jump on it and go vet it and see, how vulnerable it is. So there's a human aspect to this. There's some AI that's going on as well, but there's a big piece of it that's human based. And once the humans have, vetted and tested and they're scouring the dark web, that stuff gets added to our database. All of that happens. I don't want to use the word manually, but it does happen from humans, right? And it's assisted with AI to help uncover it and find it. But anyways, yeah. So that's the power of having the right tooling in place. So on to our last section. I think from a philosophy perspective, want to just touch. This is an open question, free for all. We can talk about whatever. Doesn't have to be security. We could talk about Jira tickets, and we could talk about Confluence. AWS isn't here to represent, but I know AWS is a partner, and their, obviously their mission in life is to, get people to work in the cloud and work more efficiently and, be able to spin up and ebb and flow as their demand comes and stuff like that. But like, what is your general philosophy for engineering teams to build faster at Atlassian? Like, how do you advise how does your company advise your customers to work faster and better?
I think we try generally with our products to try to be, you mentioned like developer first or developer focused, but I think that is something we try for with tools like Jira and Confluence, but also things like Bitbucket and Bamboo and these various developer tools. I know. So from a security perspective, something our CISO likes to say is that we're in a pretty interesting position at the Atlassian security team to help not only secure our own stuff, but also provide things to help customers secure their services that they're developing with Atlassian products. So providing things like the Snyk pipeline in Bitbucket, or the Snyk pipe in Bitbucket pipelines, or the integrations there, so that people can run security tools as part of their build process or see results in their pull requests. I think we're in a pretty interesting position there to help lots of other teams do the same sorts of things we're trying to do internally. Just cool.
Yeah, that reminds me of an old ad. I think it was like 3M or somebody. They're like, we don't make, cars. We make cars better. So we don't make the software. We make software better, right? I think we're both in that same camp where, being in a developer tool space, there's so many. I look at our customer base. I look through our Slack environment with all the deal channels. I'm like, oh my God, they're a customer. Every time I think, I know somebody that works at such and such company. Let me go, introduce them. I'm like, oh, we've already been talking to them for 6 months. So it's awesome to see how impactful and how vast these tools can play a role, right? And everybody needs them. Everybody's going to need, and it's doing nothing but accelerate over time. As we get more, everything's more digital. It sounds so cliche. As we transform and we digital, whatever. We're transformed. We're digital. Everything's digital now. Everybody's walking around with a phone in their hand and going on their insurance sites and getting their insurance, whatever, on their phone now. They don't print cards anymore. So we're there. That they're going to need security, right? Everything's containerized, right? Well, everything is being up and down. You can manage your workloads now. So yeah, I think as a philosophy, I think Snyk's philosophy, our philosophy, is obviously providing developer first functionality, meaning, we think about the developer experience first, because at the end of the day, that's where the code's happening. That's where security needs to happen. That's where we can prevent security issues from happening. And you guys, as the security team, and every other company that we help, every one of our customers feels the same way. They value the fact that we value developers, because that's your biggest pain point, right? Getting developers to actually fix their security issues or fix security issues within the code. So I think that's a a good place to be. But I don't know. Will, do you have anything to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Atlassian really, Snyk is really focusing on, improving that developer experience. And I think Atlassian's really focused on improving the overall team experience and the collaboration piece, right? I think it's like Chris and I and everyone at Atlassian, we all use Atlassian tools for everything. So we're constantly using Jira, Confluence. It's a unique situation to be in, I think, where you're using the product that you're also selling to your customers every day. So we get to use all the new things. We're constantly giving feedback to the development teams at Jira, Confluence, who also give feedback to us on how we might be handling security issues, right? But in the end, I think what Atlassian is doing with their software and helping improve how teams interact and build and create is really valuable. And Snyk is obviously able to help improve the developer experience for those product teams at Atlassian to improve the experience of the teams using the Atlassian products. So it's a nice little give and take, I think we have going on.
Cool. Awesome. That was all of the sections we had. We have about 10 minutes before the hour, but there's no reason we have to spend another 10 minutes unless anybody in the audience has some questions or you guys want to talk about another topic. We can certainly do that. I'm looking through the list. I think we addressed most of the questions at the moment. Let me look in the Q&A section. Nope. Yeah. So I think we're good unless you guys have any other thoughts or anything else to add.
Nothing from me.
No,
Cool.
I think that was
Yeah, this was really fun. I appreciate you guys' time today and everybody in the audience who joined today to participate and watch and ask questions. Thank you very much. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Jason, Chris, and Will, thank you all so much for joining me today. I really appreciated having you all on the show.
Yeah,
My
thank you.
pleasure.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just give a quick reminder to our audience that our session today was recorded. Should you want to rewatch this program, you will be receiving a link via email, and that link will take you to the on-demand recording. You can also find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and just be sure to look in the on-demand section. It'll be waiting for you. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card giveaway are Brian B., Sven L., Rex L., and Giovanni R. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. You should receive that email in about the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see that email, just check your spam folder in case. I'd like to thank AWS and Snyk for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone who has been with us for the past 50 minutes, thank you so much for being here. We really value your time and we want to hear your feedback. There'll be a survey that pops right up as soon as we close out. So feel free to give us your thoughts there about maybe today's program or what you'd like to see on a future program. Regardless, we hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day. And Chris, Jason, Will, thank you all once more.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.